welcome to the Data Democracy, presented by renowned O'Reilly author Ole Olesen-Bagneux, empowered by Xenia. Make your data accessible and discoverable by anyone, anywhere, at any time.
Hi everybody, you're listening to The Data Democracy and I'm your host Ole Olesen-Bagneux, Chief Evangelist in Xenia and the author of the Enterprise Data Catalog published by O'Reilly. In this podcast we explore what an enterprise data democracy is with knowledgeable guests. Today's guest is Gabs Ferreira. Gabs is a technology storyteller through all the formats you can imagine. Articles, podcasts, videos and almost any type of content. I met Gabs as he was organizing a talk between me and the Brazilian data community, and I was struck by his extremely smooth, fun way of presenting complex technology, which also has a bit of tech nostalgia in its aesthetics. And so my takeaways from the conversation with Gabs are: first, a data democracy takeaway. In order to let technology be understood, stories must grow organically across all platforms, from short statements to longer statements, going from e.g. X to LinkedIn to Substack Medium. And then second, a data later takeaway. Let people follow their heart. Working with data should be fun. Use the flexibility of the field to maximize the potential of each individual, just like Gabs did for himself, changing from programming to teaching. And then third, a personal takeaway. I want to explore the Brazilian tech community more. It's super interesting and it's super strong. Gabs is a great example of that, so get ready. Here comes Gabs. Hi, Gabs.
Hey, Ole. How are you doing, man?
I'm fine. And what about you? Are you okay?
Yeah, it's a bit hotter than the usual at this time in Brazil, but yeah, fine.
Yeah, that's pretty much all over, right? I want to begin with your professional background, what you have done in the past and so forth. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, what you do and what you used to do and all that?
Yeah, sure, man. So first of all, thanks for having me here. I'm always happy when people invite me to their podcast because it's my favorite media. I started as a developer in 2007, I guess. Yeah, 7. And I worked for around 7-8 years as a developer in many different companies, usually with .NET and Java development. And I never worked with data during this period. And then after 8 years working as a developer, I got into this school here in São Paulo, this programming school, and I started teaching classes and got more and more involved with content and community work, something that I have never done before. And then I realized that I was way better in doing that kind of work than coding. So my career was I had this shift when I made this movement when I got this job in this school, and then I stopped coding. I stopped working as a developer, and I went full content creation, community dev work. I worked for this company for around 8 years again, and in there I did like multiple things related to content. I hosted 3 different podcasts. I organized a lot of in-person events and online events, and I was part of the marketing team for a while. That they didn't have a marketing team specifically to talk about tech courses for the Brazilian community, and I got involved in many different things that I had no prior experience, like writing scripts for videos or even being the director of videos, something that at the time I didn't realize what I was doing, to be honest. Now I look back and I see that I was doing that, but it was like a great experience for me. It was really good thing. And then a year and a half ago, approximately, I met this startup from Estonia called Alvin, and then there were like half of the company there were Brazilians, and I got in touch with them.
In Estonia?
In Estonia.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. Cool.
yeah.
Cool.
That happened because the first developer that they hired, that the founders hired, was a Brazilian, and then this Brazilian brought more Brazilians, and then the company was half Brazilian after a while.
Ah. Okay. Okay. I get it.
Yeah,
Ah, that's so funny.
yeah, yeah. So I saw one day a post of one of them on LinkedIn talking about the company, what they were doing there, and that it was such an interesting niche. And I was like, wow, that looks cool. And then I got in touch with the founders. I told them a longer version of what I just told you, and
Hmm.
that maybe I could do some kind of work like that there. And yeah, they hired me like after 2 to 3 months talking and me showing them what we could do and possibilities and how this content and developer relations work could work with them. And yeah, they hired me. I went to Estonia like 3 times during this period, and I worked in this company until 2 months ago. And it's there when we met, I guess, right? Yeah,
Yes. Yes.
yeah,
We met like I think we met when you were still with Alvin,
yeah.
the data lineage company, and I just recall uh, like being very puzzled why this big time Brazilian tech influencer was with an Estonian company, but now I understand a little
Yeah,
better.
yeah, yeah.
So you were still there with that company, but you recently made a change, right?
Yeah. So what happened, Ola, is that I was doing this work there. It was cool. People there are awesome people. I was getting a good salary. I was, having the opportunity to travel to Europe at least once a year, which is something for Brazilians that is very expensive. So it was like a
Mhm.
nice thing to have. But I was doing a work that I see this now that I it's not that I didn't like it, but it's not what I wanted to be doing. It's not
Mhm.
something that I believe in. The trigger to make this change was that I launched my own podcast like 4 months ago, and I always wanted to have a podcast. I'm a avid listener of podcasts. As I said in the beginning, it's my favorite media, and I wanted to do something, and I never did. But suddenly I did, and when I did, people really enjoyed what I was doing there because I did something different than most tech podcasts in Brazil were doing. And this was like the trigger for me to say, hey, I want to maybe try a career as a full-time content creator, solopreneur. I don't know what I am right now, to be honest. But yeah,
I have
so
several.
you know.
I simply have several questions for you right now that I want to ask you. First of all, so several questions. I want to ask you
Yeah.
about your podcast. I want to ask you about what you call yourself and what you think about that because I'm very curious. So, but first of all, your podcast. I've been following it on LinkedIn. I mean, I like being able to talk and like read and write French. I can decipher Portuguese if I read it very slowly.
Mhm.
So I've been following your podcast with quite some interest, and it's really picking up. Right, there's a lot of people enjoying it. I can see that you're very popular in Brazil. And I've been thinking a lot about the podcast format myself because it's something that I really love, but it's also something that you have to be a little cautious about, right? So tell me, how have you moderated your podcast format? What makes your podcast a little different than the others, and what do you think that most data podcasts do that
Hmm.
you would like to differentiate yourself from?
Yeah, I think that most podcasts they have um, specific formats that most people use. One of them is interview, just like we're doing here right now.
Hmm.
So I'll sit with you for an hour and we'll talk about specific subjects. You write down some topics, and later we're gonna edit and release it. So this is the most common format. And the other one is almost the same thing, but with more people. So we're gonna say like three, 4 people and talk about the subject for time. Then later we're gonna edit this or not. Some people don't; they just throw that the way it is. And I I do have this American podcasts as a reference that I really like. One is called Reply All, that unfortunately is not active anymore, and this other one called Heavyweight, and both of them are the Reply All is about tech, but it's not about like deep tech. Let's talk about
No. I get
JavaScript
it.
or data. So it's about stories. So stories about people in tech,
Hmm.
and they always go deep in the story and try to focus on stories of people rather than the tech itself. So it's more narrative. It has a story. It has a
Mm.
it's some sort of investigation. Like
Yeah,
it's
cool.
different. It obviously it's harder to make, right? Because
Yeah,
yeah,
of course. It
but it's
takes a lot of
different.
preparation, a lot
Yeah.
of investigation, research.
Yeah. So my podcast right now is basically a mix of everything that I just told you. It's like I do have interviews. Like for example, today I released an episode that is an interview with a guy that I met a few weeks ago. But I try to mix this narrative format with the interviews because nobody here in Brazil at least is doing this in tech. Like my podcast is different from the others because all the others are the most common formats and which are easier to produce, as you said, right? So this is what this is making it different, I guess. But it's a lot of work. But I'm really enjoying doing this. I do have great stories there involving my daughter, my grandmas, and even my father at some
Mm.
point. And it's a very personal podcast, to be honest. There's a lot of things that I'm going through right now that I went through in the past, like frustrations and things that people relate to that I'm putting and sharing in there that makes people feel they're not alone. Because every time you have a frustration, especially related to career,
Mm.
it's very easy to feel alone because when you go into social media like LinkedIn or other ones, it's only all you see is going to be success and people are sharing.
Success, no failure. I know
Yeah,
everything.
yeah,
Yeah. All the classics, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Gabs, I really love your take. It's appealing in many ways. It's appealing because it's personal and vulnerable.
Yeah, yeah,
It's appealing because you obviously deliver high quality content. There's so many podcasts out there where you just turn on the mic and like, okay, you have the attention now, talk. I mean, no preparation. It's completely
yeah,
unstructured conversations. I
yeah,
dislike that quite a lot myself.
yeah,
And then also like the entire, I even say machismo of tech, like this male majority of no failure and a lot of success, a lot of money. Yeah, I think that is a very appealing format. I
yeah.
wish it was better at Portuguese. I would follow it. I'll try to pick up on some of the episodes, but I won't get like 100% out of it. But I can listen to it and get some meaning out of it still. I mean, my own podcast is I think I try to differentiate myself in the sense that I explore a topic, and it's data democracy. It's a little difficult, so it's something that I open the conversations gradually as we talk and focus it on the data democracy. And I do not intend to have all the answers. So instead of having like this talk where you exchange, I had this success and I had that success, I try to really be open and say, okay, I have some ideas about what a data democracy is. It's a state that I want to obtain. I think each and every single enterprise should have that state, but I don't have all the answers to how we establish this, and I certainly don't have all the technical explanations. So that's how I think about it. But yeah, also I want to recommend for the listeners just taking a look at all your banners, these beautiful illustrations that you're making for your podcast. I follow them and enjoy them on LinkedIn every time you post. It's so
Using
beautiful.
Mid Journey.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Okay, so anyway, I wanted to also touch upon the other thing that you mentioned, and that is actually the first question that I specifically had for you after we talked about your background, and that is you call yourself a technology storyteller on LinkedIn, and I really enjoy that way of describing what you do. I've been called, and I just happen to call you that too, a data influencer. I hate that term, so apologies, Gabs, for
No, it's
calling you
okay.
that. It's someone that you can give that person a bribe, and they will say whatever you want them to say. Well, that's a data influencer for me, and I do not consider myself that at all. I do not consider that you that at all. But and I like the idea of being a technology storyteller. That's something a little different. So can you elaborate a little bit on what you think of as a technology storyteller?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that we are always trying to define ourselves somehow. Specifically, when we're talking about work and social media, you have to define yourself at least once. And it was always very hard for me to define myself. I never found a specific term to talk about what I do or what I want to do in this phase of my career. When I was a developer, it was easier. I was a developer then. I would say,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. But right now, my work it's different because it touches very different points. What I'm doing, it's a mix of marketing, but also is a relationship, but also is sale somehow. So the value of what I do, if I'm working for a company, it's a mix of different things. Now I'm working just for myself, and what I'm trying to do, to be honest, is that I can be myself full time. I can be just
Hmm.
Gabs. Who's Gabs? Oh, he's Gabs. You know him. He's Gabs. He's that guy that does lots of things, and you know his work. What I do, my goal. I just posted this on Twitter a few minutes ago. Is that my goal for the next years is to create content that is so good that will be impossible for people and companies to ignore me, not know about me. Uh, because I feel, at least in the Brazilian community, in the Brazilian tech scene, there's a lot of people doing the same things, copying each other and following formulas, and nothing against that, but I really want to do something different. I do feel the same thing for the English speaking community, not only the Brazilian ones. But going back to your question, as a storyteller, I feel that talking to tech people is something that is different from talking to other people, at least in my experience, because usually these people are tech savvy, they are smart, and when you try to sell them products or things that you're just trying to sell, they will figure out really easy. They will like, no, marketing bullshit. And
Hmm.
and I think the one of the strongest ways to connect with people is telling stories. And I say that because, I don't know, when you are a kid and your parents are trying to teach you something, usually they will tell you a story about this guy that fell into a hole, or this kid that didn't eat his food and went to the doctor. It's like you tell stories, and it's easier for kids, and I think it's easier for adults as well. Um, I think this is the kind of thing that really makes people stick with you. It's how if you tell them a good story, if you tell them an interesting content, rather than just saying, buy my data catalog book.
Hmm.
It's if you tell your story about how hard it was to write this book, how you had to spend a lot of time writing and didn't spend time with your family, and show
Hmm.
your human side, I think it's sometimes way more effective than just saying all the benefits that you are offering them in their book. I mean, obviously there's millions of ways of doing that, but I don't know. I believe in that, and I think now in everything that I do, in my podcast, in my videos, in everything, I realize that I'm good at writing stories. And when I say stories, it doesn't need to be like a full script. You know, a short video of 30 seconds can be a story. You can write a good story.
Yeah, but
You can do
I it resonates with me what you're saying, Gabs.
yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
Um, and I think the difference is that like being what someone calls a content creator is something very shallow.
yeah,
It's for me it's just like you take on a funny hat and you explain some kind of technology pulling attention by visual effects, but no sincerity. And I dislike that a lot, and I think it will disappear more and more. I think
yeah,
you are really onto something in the way you explain technology to people.
yeah,
I want to move on a little bit, and you already touched upon it, but how would you how would you describe the Brazilian tech and data community? I think my listeners would be curious to learn that. I mean, I hope I get listeners also in Brazil, of course, but how would you describe the scene over there? What's it
yeah.
like? I mean, I've
Well,
heard very good things about it. I want to
yeah,
say that I've heard things about how tech savvy, like the Brazilian tech community, really is. But in your words, how is it?
yeah. So I think that first of all, most people in Brazil don't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in a privileged bubble, I could say. Most people yet don't speak English, so they do not have access to this kind of content, for example, and many other ones. But as you said, people are very they're very engaged in communities. But most communities and tech events are in the southern part of Brazil, in
Yeah.
São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro and the south of Brazil. In the upper part of Brazil, there is less communities. There's less things happening, and also less tech companies in general.
Mm-hmm.
But people here are very engaged in the communities, and they have this need of good content and good people to talk about different things, because since they don't have access to all this English content that is created in many different levels worldwide, they are limited to the Portuguese community, Portuguese speaking community. So there is a lot of space to grow here,
Mm-hmm.
for companies and for people interested in creating international communities. And yeah, I think that's basically. I think there's a lot of space here, to be honest. Like a lot, a lot.
Mm.
I constantly talk to companies and people that want to um, increase the reach and hire more Brazilian people. That there's really a lot of people here that want this content and want this stuff that they don't have access in Portuguese. Is your book being released in Portuguese?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
Thank you.
cool.
It's getting published in Portuguese.
Cool.
It's an editor in Sao Paulo called Novatec Editorial
Oh yeah,
that bought the rights. It's very friendly of you, but I wanna I wanna move on a little bit in the questions. I think you have answered some of the things that I wanted to ask you about the tech scene in Brazil. Still, though, I want to talk a little bit about meetups in Brazil. So, how is a meetup in Brazil? You have apparently arranged quite a lot of meetups.
yeah,
So
yeah.
how are they like? I mean, do people discuss? Is it in in North America and to a certain extent in Europe? They are very like low key, easy conversations. Is it the same kind of format in Brazil? Or?
Yeah, I think it depends on the community that you are in. Most communities that I have joined meetups are usually one or two talks from people that previously uh, 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 submitted talks to the meetups, and there's usually snacks and sometimes beer. I think it's not that different from the other meetups, yeah. But yeah, I think that sometimes depending on the meetup event that you're going, if it's a bigger one organized by a company, they will have maybe one or two things that are different. Like I went to this meetup, this Angular meetup once that was hosted in a company, and this company was sponsoring it. That at the end of the meetup, there was a band playing rock and beers. But most of the times, I think it's not so different. Tech people usually have
Okay.
this,
Okay.
this behavior.
Yeah. Okay. So moving into like the technology storytelling part, I'm curious about this element of talking to you, obviously, because I think it ties very closely to data democracy. But I'll get back to that. First of all, at a more general level, uh, how do you make someone with the deep knowledge of a certain technology or technologies? How do you facilitate that they are able to explain this their knowledge about a specific technology to an audience with no knowledge about it? Like how do you make explanations of complex technology in a simple way? You're very good at that, Gabs. How do you do that?
Well, I think that there's two things there. First of all, people that have a very deep knowledge and that are very technical sometimes have one thing called ego,
Yeah.
that you have to, work with that because sometimes they're like a bit, I wouldn't say arrogant, but, they're like too confident, I would say. So you have to show that you're there, to ask them things and that you realize that they are smart, that you realize that they have this knowledge. So I would say the first thing is, to treat people well. I'm not sure if well is the word, but respect what they have to say and try to show that you want to learn from them. And the other thing is to make them realize that what they're talking about is not common knowledge, because it's very easy for developers and tech people get so deep into something that they talk about it as if it was easy and everybody could understand. So
Mhm.
you have to be aware of that and say, okay, what did you just say? Can you come back and explain that again, please? And and then one thing that I always try to do is um, to find is to relate what they're saying to more common things, like get an example about data lineage, for example, and get this topic, this subject, and compare it to a real world thing, like, I don't know, something that people have in their homes. And I think this is one thing that makes people understand better. And there's this other thing, but this depends a lot on where you are. But when I taught classes, we had this system that I try to use into today when I'm in front of an audience. If I can interact with them, is instead of just throwing the content and throwing the knowledge at them, I try to build the knowledge with them and ask questions and make them talk to me. Like, instead of saying, "Hey, everyone, I'm going to talk about data lineage today. Data lineage is this. Here's this concept." I'm going to say, "Hey, folks, what happens when you try to track your system?" Say, oh, people say, "Oh, try to track my system doing this and that." I say, "Yeah, but isn't that a problem?" Oh, try to build
Mm.
the knowledge with them instead of just throwing everything as if I knew everything. So it's a little
Yeah.
bit of what we said in the past, right? Is try to, instead of being a teacher, being a facilitator, a person that is there to try to make you grasp the content instead of just throw everything at once and you figure out how you do it. This is what I try to do when I can.
I love that. I really
Mhm.
love that. And so, like in the spirit of data democracy, you have any more tricks like on how to educate people so they understand technology? How do you educate people so that they understand technology as fast as possible with a maximum effect? Can, like, besides the simpler the specific situation where you built with them, have you, what formats works, what specific mediums, what's your what's your experience in making people understand technology fast?
Hmm. That's a hard one. Uh,
Yeah, but you have been in roles both as a teacher,
yeah.
but also creating or writing. I'd say I prefer writing your own stories, telling a lot of stories in ways that have made people relate to technology in a new way. I mean, uh, what's what if you should try to sum it all up?
Hmm.
Is it possible?
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
I think that people have different ways of learning. Some people will prefer to read a blog post. Some people will prefer to read a book from the beginning to the end. Some people prefer to watch a video. Other will listen to an audiobook or a podcast. And I think there's like it's very hard to do everything. When you are creating content, be it for a company or for launching a book or for your live show or for whatever. It's very hard to do everything. But in my content right now, I try to create a little bit of everything in multiple channels. So I try to be on Instagram and TikTok, which are short videos and stuff. I try to have a weekly. I try no, I do have a weekly newsletter where I write once a week. I do have my YouTube channel with deeper content and longer format content, and I think that when we're speaking in content to teach people, I think the way you can do to maximize this impact is reuse and repurpose this content to max you can. Like a lot of content that I do starts with like a tweet. I do a tweet about something, and then people will answer me, and then I'll get the content and post on LinkedIn with a longer version, and then I'll repurpose that for an Instagram video that will be longer and a little bit more visual, and then I'll maybe turn that into a video later, a longer video for YouTube. So repurposing content, I think it's a way of trying to make people learn things different ways. And especially when we are talking about content and social media, it takes time for people to realize who you are. So the more time
mm,
they see you in different places, the more quickly they will realize who you are, what you do, and everything else. Sometimes people have the impression that okay, I'm gonna write a book and release it, and the board will come and buy the book, and I think you're probably feeling that right now. Books nowadays are a beginning, not an end, right? It's
yeah,
beginning of something.
I really know what you mean. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes, oh yes. But I love Gabs. I gotta say, I didn't want to cut you off, but
No,
since we are
sure.
laughing now, I think this is a very beautiful way of explaining how you maximize the empowerment of everyone to understand technology and ultimately obtain a data democracy in a company. It's this movement of ideas from very short formats, certain social media, into longer formats, longer texts, longer videos on LinkedIn or other medium, and then flip-flopping that into even longer context or smaller context again, so that it's this entirely organic evolvement of ideas that you communicate across platforms and media.
Yeah.
I really love that. Honestly, I have not thought of I won't say that approach, but just that behavior. For me, it's
Yeah.
always been more or less only LinkedIn, long posts, and books. And I've been trying to get my Medium profile up and running for like 2.5 years, but I haven't succeeded in it. And I find it hard to be on social media with like short statement social medias like, such as X or Mastodon or Threads. I mean, I love Mastodon a lot, but I can definitely see that the way that you're empowering people, making them understand technology, and ultimately getting better at using data is something that you can do in that way. So that's a very like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's just a very educational answer. Thank you very much, Gabs.
Yeah.
I have one last answer for you, and then we will stop. And that is, it's a very open question. I don't expect any specific kind of answer from you, but like, given the rise of generative AI, how do you see the future of what you're doing and basically what we're doing right now, both of us, like not creating content, because that I think we will not miss content creation, but technology storytelling, these deeper, more intelligent way of communicating about technology and data. How do you see the future of that, given the rise of generative AI?
In my point of view, generative AI are tools that are gonna help us like a lot. For example, maybe you can throw all the content of your book on AI and say generate tweets for the next 6 months based on the
Yeah.
content of this book. So this is something that is good. A lot of people, when we talk about generative AI, are scared of being replaced and all that. All that conversation around that. And obviously, I think that maybe some jobs will be affected. Maybe some are being affected. By the way, right? Like especially people that write and. But I think personally that the people that at least now, maybe in 5 years, this will be different, but at least now, I feel that people and jobs and functions that are being replaced are the most generic ones. I think there will never be a machine that will be able to replace Ole and Gabs, and
Oh,
what makes, as I said in the other questions, what makes people stay with you, be for content creation or for teaching data democracy, is uh, obviously the quality of your content and how this solves their problems, but also how they identify with you, how they feel that you understand their pain and what they're going through, whatever be it. And the machine will never be able to understand what people feel for real. They can mimic that, but they'll never be able to do that. And I don't know. I feel that I'm not afraid about that.
no, no.
I feel like, as I said, there's a lot of people doing the same thing, and the for me, this tools, they will help more people create content and do great things. For example, you were saying about my the cover arts for my podcast. I will never be able to do that by myself, and I can do it
Mm.
now because I have access to a tool where I pay $10 a month that can create awesome images for me. Uh, but maybe someone would say, "Oh, but you are, I don't know, taking a job from a designer or something like that." I don't have money to pay a designer.
No, 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 no.
So, and I won't have for a long time. So I think it's I don't know. For me, it's a way of giving people more opportunities to do good content and good things with their talent.
Agreed, Gabs. Well, that was it. Thank you very much for being on. And definitely stay in touch.
Yeah, sure, man.